expectations versus reality. And I feel like to a certain extent, romance novels and romance movies give you high expectations of what a meet cute should look like. But when it really happens, it's awkward. It's
Yes.
usually awkward. Or you can't even call it a meet cute at the time. You only figure it out later.
Welcome to Speculative Sandbox, your audio playground for creative storytellers. My name is Vicky Lawn, and each episode, I and a guest will unpack a fiction trope with an eye for character development and narrative structures. Make sure to look for Speculative Sandbox on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, where you can join the conversation. Leave comments or questions, or let us know what other tropes we should cover. When the real world just doesn't cut it, let's get lost in a fictional one.
This episode is brought to you by Stars. Lisa Tadeo's best-selling book is about to become your favorite new show. Based on a true story, the new Stars original series 3 Women stars Shailene Woodley as Gia, a grieving and struggling writer who embarks on a cross-country road trip where she meets 3 women determined to radically change their lives. This one is not to be missed. Watch the season premiere of 3 Women now, only on Stars and the Stars app.
This is Kristen Bell.
And Adam Brody.
And we're dating.
In our new show, Nobody Wants This.
Right. We're not really dating.
No, in real life, we're married.
Right. Married to other people, not each other.
Oh, this is complicated.
Right. It's just like our love lives in Nobody Wants This, a show about what happens when a bold and sometimes provocative podcast host finds her unlikely match in a sweet traditional rabbi.
Nobody Wants This launches September 26th, only on Netflix.
What happens when 2 potentially romantic interests cross each other for the first time? They have a meet cute. Author Salem Miles joins the podcast to talk about the different dynamics that come out of a meet cute, how these dynamics further the plot and character developments, and whether or not meet cutes happen in real life. Plus, it wouldn't be a speculative episode without unpacking the darker sides of this romance trope. What happens when a meet cute takes a turn for the worse? Salem Miles, thank you so much for joining me on Speculative Sandbox. This episode comes out just ahead of Valentine's Day, which is very fitting because we're talking about meet cutes. But before we get to the topic, can you please introduce yourself and tell us and the listeners some of your latest projects?
All right. My name is Salem Miles, and I am an 18-year-old author. I started writing when I was 14. And I only published just last year. And I published my debut series, the Devington series, which will be finished this year. And my current project, well, the one that is coming out soon, is Ordinary Human Beings. And it's a sapphic YA romance. And I am so excited for everyone to read it because I worked really hard on it.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see that come out. I have some rapid fire warm-up questions before we get to the topic. Are you ready?
I am.
Okay. So, as I said, this episode releases on Valentine's Day week. Do you have any plans for Valentine's Day?
I do, actually. I'm gonna go on a date.
Do you know where you're going?
I don't know yet. He said it's going to be a surprise.
Ooh, okay. Well, I'm excited for you. For the next question, this is a silly one. It's actually known for being used for job interviews. But if you could be any tree, what tree would you be?
If I was a tree, I'd be an apple tree.
Aw, that's a sweet tree. Describe your ideal writing ambiance. Like, where do you like to write?
Where I like to write somewhere that's really quiet so that I can, express my thoughts properly and organize them properly. So I like to write somewhere quiet, like either in my room or in the study room. And usually if I'm not all up for like the quietness, I could like put some low music to play and to set the mood.
What is your favorite romance story?
My favorite mistake by Chelsea Cameron. I think that was my first book that I've ever read, and it got me into writing and reading at the same time.
What is the most heartbreaking thing that you think can pull a romantic couple apart?
Could be miscommunication or unfortunate circumstances like right person, wrong time. I really think that the right person, wrong time is the most heartbreaking, pull factor for a relationship because you want them to get together, but then certain circumstances just can't keep them in the same place together at the same time.
That I've seen a couple movies like that where you like, oh, La La Land. It's like,
Absolutely.
yeah, where they're so perfect for each other, but they want different things, and so they go their separate ways. And oh, so sad. There is drama anywhere you go in every industry. So tell me, what is the latest drama in the romance book world?
um, I don't really know.
Maybe that's good. You're not part of it. That's awesome. All right, you ready to go into the topic questions?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. The topic today is meet cutes. What is a meet cute, and why is it such an important part of romance fiction?
So a meet cute is when two characters have a chance encounter that sets up for, the next time they meet each other again. And usually this establishes that these two characters are going to fall in love eventually, and that us as the readers should root for them to like get together. And I think that it's important in fiction because um, it builds character, it builds your character development, your character's development. Um, it also builds the plot, and it gives the reader something to expect towards the end, because usually the characters get together towards the end or in the mid.
What would be an example of your favorite meet cute?
My favorite meet cute is going to be Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen.
Okay.
One of my favorite romance books of all time, by the way. Where Elizabeth overhears Mr. Darcy speaking about her, insulting her before they actually meet. And it's just so awkward, but somehow I find myself rooting for them to get together
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
they have a really nice dynamic that, they use, or that they talk to each other or have, some sort of chemistry at the start that makes me want to reach for them.
Nice. My first exposure to Pride and Prejudice was the Keira Knightley version that came out, oh gosh, like at least 10 years ago now. And that scene when they're in like the ballroom and they show up and he, yeah, insults her, and then they have their kind of, conversation, and he asks
Yeah.
her, I think it's something on the lines of like, what do you recommend as like a key to a woman's heart or something? And she says, dancing, even if if the partner's barely tolerable. I probably butchered that whole thing, but I love that.
Okay. That's okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I did some research on meet cutes, especially when it came to creating relationship dynamics. Why are these meet cutes so impactful? And that's when I learned about the push and pull dynamics, whether it's pull, push, pull, nervous, neutral. I wanted to walk through each of them. So let's start with pull. This is where the characters are instantly attracted to each other. What do you think of this form of meet cute?
I think this form of meet cute is a really adorable, cheesy meet cute because it instantly piques the reader's interest and gives them more to, root for the characters. Like, for example, in the movie that I recently watched, when I was preparing for this, I watched Her. I think it came out in 2013, and it's where Theodore met Samantha, and they instantly had, attraction towards each other. They were making each other laugh. Their conversation was flowing. So I think that it really pulls the reader in and gives them more to root for in terms of these two becoming a couple.
Is the Her you're talking about, is that with the one I'm thinking of is Scarlett Johansson and Joaquin Phoenix? Is that the same one?
Yes, it is.
Yes. Okay. That one was so interesting. It's such an interesting concept because it's artificial intelligence and a man who feels very kind of isolated and alone in the world and turns to this program for partnership and comfort. And then it ends up becoming a very interesting cross. I don't even know how to describe it, but it's like a relationship builds between them.
Yeah, it is. I really enjoyed seeing their dynamic on screen, and like as a viewer, I instantly wanted them to get together
Uh-huh.
because it was just so reciprocal. The chemistry between those two, I could feel it through the screen.
Yeah. Well, did you hear that originally it was a different actress that played the Samantha, right? Yeah. It was a different actress. They filmed the whole thing, and that voice I think just didn't vibe with the show, the movie, or Joaquin. And so they had Scarlett Johansson come in afterwards and she did the whole thing, and her voice I think just has a huge impact and really helps to push that fantasy, the idea of someone really loving you and being there for you from the start.
I did not know that there was another actress, but I think they made the right choice because
Agreed.
I can't imagine another person playing Samantha.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Any other examples of pull before we move on?
I think I'm gonna have to mention my ongoing works.
Okay. Yeah.
um, so for the second book that I'm planning to release this year, it's called 22 Letters. Leon, like our main character, is attracted to Nathan on the football team, and they both meet each other for the first time, even though they go to the same school, and they have some playful banter. They make each other laugh, and it all ends with them going on a date with each other. So I I really loved writing their chemistry. I loved writing how they talk to each other, how they try to understand each other because they're coming from two different places.
It seems so wholesome, the pool, when it comes down to it. Just this kind of happy circumstance where both people seem fully engaged from the start, as
Absolutely.
opposed to the push, where both characters are immediately disinterested, which is such an interesting dynamic because the whole story ultimately is about how both of these characters overcome that. So what do you think of the push dynamic?
I think this is second to pull for me, because at first glance they're disinterested or like they just hate each other. And another, I feel like one example that I could give is when Harry met Sally. I watched this with like my partner last week, and even though they didn't really like each other at first, as time grew on, they started having feelings, they started becoming friends, and it turned into a romantic relationship. So I really like the push factor because it allows the characters to overcome, their obstacles, their differences, or at least try to compromise. And this gives, the viewers or like the readers something to, look forward to. It's entertaining. The banter is usually entertaining and fun. So yeah.
Awesome. Have you seen Bridgerton?
Absolutely. I saw the second season just
Yes.
recently. Why did
It's
that come to mind?
yes, that one when we were talking about the push instantly thought of the lead romance story in season 2 of Bridgerton, where you have two people who are supposedly, completely against each other, but there's that dynamic, there's magnetism between them the entire time, which I think is such a delicate balance, because you have to give the characters reason to be angry with each other. So in the case of Bridgerton season 2, I think he was rude to her and at the first meeting, and she overheard him like boasting to his friends, but at the same time she was also hearing rumors about him that didn't paint him in a very positive light. And then I think he was also receiving the similar, right? Like hearing that she was kind of tight and not very approachable, and was really there just to like hover over her younger sister, and the world seemed to be pushing him towards the younger sister. So you have these reasons why they can't be together, but then it doesn't deny the animal attraction that still needs to be very prevalent the entire time.
I think what made their dynamic so interesting was that in this case, every time that they tried to get close to each other or show some sort of romantic interest in one another, they immediately cover it up, which keeps, the viewers interested to see where this is going to end up, because eventually it's going to happen. And the buildup is just so immaculate. It's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. It's very satisfying, right? Because as a viewer or a reader, you are invested and you spent a lot of time in the development. So it's like, and that's one of the things I always find interesting. So I don't write romance. I write a lot of like science fiction, speculative stuff, and there's like the
Mhm.
big build up at the end. Um, it involves like a lot of different factors coming together, and all the plot points have to come together. But when it's romance, it's like this really perfect balance of stakes and motives when they finally do hook up, right, in romance novels. But it has to also balance, like for example, there's a reason why they weren't together, and they have to wrap that up, right? Like it can't just
Yeah.
be, despite these issues, we don't care. That's great, but those issues that tried to pull them apart, they continue to have prevalence in the plot. So being able to like, wrap that all in together, it takes skill.
Yeah, it really does. And I didn't know you write science fiction.
Yes, I enjoy science fiction because I love social commentary, which is where I tend to well, that's at least where my books tend to end up. I don't have anything out yet, or my agent's shopping, but I'm currently
Okay.
drafting some stuff. But I love having romantic subplots. I just love the idea of people coming together under, fighting for like the same cause, or even like the sci-fi scenario brings two opposing people together. That's great too. So, okay. So then the next dynamic is push pull, where one person is interested, the other is not. Which when I first read this, I was like, that sounds a little scary. But what are your thoughts on this, and how do you think it's portrayed in stories?
Well, this is an interesting one. Um, because, as a reader, I'm not really expecting it, but it's amazing because it makes for good conflict. One person is attracted to the other person, and ultimately they're trying to win over the other person. That's for some of, the books that I've seen. It's either the person is trying to win them over, or they subsequently fall for each other together, like the next person falls for them. And yeah, I really think it makes for engaging conflict, because you're gonna try to see how far the characters are going to go to, become a romantic couple.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the movie that comes to mind for me is The Notebook. And The Notebook,
Oh.
um, Noah really likes Addie, but Addie at the time is, on a date with another guy. So Noah tries to have some sort of, dialogue with her, tries to talk to her and get closer to her, um, in hopes of her showing some interest. in him, and it does work out eventually. But I think the conflict was like engaging. It was really interesting to see how far Noah was willing to go to, let Ali be the woman of his dreams.
Mm-hmm. That gets me thinking too about I've been getting, late night browsing Netflix.
Uh-huh.
I fell into a little K-drama bubble for a little bit. I was just browsing through a bunch of them, and there are a lot of romance dramas. And
Uh-huh.
a very common trope that I was seeing is usually when the story's told from the woman's perspective is that she's interested in this like debonair, suave, mysterious guy, and the guy is like doesn't like above her, like is so powerful, is so rich, so wealthy, so amazing, so whatever, that he's not interested at all in her. So then a portion of the story is she's in scenarios with him where she really, really likes him, and he's just like,
Uh-huh.
you're nothing. But eventually and I guess that shift dynamic is what makes it so suspenseful. But yeah, it's really interesting how that one works.
It really is. It's
Do
not
you
my favorite though.
do you think that the push pull dynamic is one that I always find that can actually have some possibly negative outcomes in the real world if you buy into the romantic twist? Like, for example, the idea that no means no, and that
Uh,
persistent chasing isn't going to change. It's
someone.
not a good idea. It won't change the mind. It probably isn't a good idea. There's this joke online where they talk about, you ask your grandma, how did she meet your grandpa? And then as you listen and they tell you the story, you realize grandpa just chased her until she said okay. You know? So,
Yeah,
you know,
it really wouldn't work in real life. Like, for example, I remember I had a crush on like my friend, and it did not work out. And because I used to watch a lot of romance movies, I thought that, if I chased the person around,
yeah.
then maybe they just like me. And it did not work out. It actually ended in a really bad friendship,
Mm,
broken up.
yeah. Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah.
I guess that's what makes that dynamic kind of a fantasy, like in that general sense where it's a movie, it's self-contained. You have characters that are, exist in that world, and hopefully there's a positive outcome. What I love about the push-pull dynamic is that it actually, once you jump genres, like you start going into thrillers, and suspense,
Mhm.
then then it becomes like fuel for something else. But anyway, so moving on from push pull, the other dynamic for relationship meet cutes is neutral nervous, where one person tries to hide their attraction while the other is oblivious to the situation. What do you think of neutral nervous?
This creates humor in the story, obviously. For example, the latest book that I'm planning on releasing in 2 months, Ordinary Human Beings, has our main character Kendall attracted to Yasmina, but she is absolutely clueless. Every time Kendall does something, out of, awkwardness or shyness, Yasmina rubs it off or brushes it off, and she doesn't see it as romantic or, flirtatious. So I think it creates humor, and it creates, a quite steady build up to the moment till the next character, till the character finds out that, oh, everything they were doing before was because that they had feelings for me. So I
Mhm.
really like this dynamic because it's also the most realistic one of them all,
Mhm.
because it does happen in the real life, in the real world too. Another example is me and my boyfriend. I did not know he was attracted to me at all. I really didn't know. The way that I treat him and the way he treat me was like a brother-sister relationship until I figured out that, oh, it's not. It's not. He's attracted to me. So it's the most realistic one out of the bunch that we mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it helps the readers relate to it because I'm sure it's happened to everyone at some point where you
Yeah.
didn't really know that this person likes me or this person liked me. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, it is a subtle dynamic. But it makes me think of a Bollywood film called Om Shanti Om that came out maybe 15 years ago. It had Shah Rukh Khan, who's like the biggest actor in Bollywood in India.
All right.
And Deepika Padukone is the lead female. Beautiful. It's a gorgeous movie. Highly recommend if anyone wants to kind of know like what does Bollywood look like during that time period. It's an homage to like I think the 70s of movie making. But the point of it is you have this movie extra who falls in love with like the lead female superstar. And the entire time he's trying to like get to know her better, and she's seemingly completely oblivious to
Yeah.
his interests, and he's not outright, like I mean, clearly he's interested, so maybe he's not pushing exactly, but he's like nervously going and saying, hi, I like you. How do you react to this? How do you respond? Until the midpoint when you discover that she's actually a very unhappy actress who's secretly married to a producer and isn't allowed to live her life publicly. And of course,
Oh,
from his perspective, that's devastating. That's
oh
only the
my.
midpoint, though. There's a whole second half of the movie where it has a really good outcome. But that's a nice example of, especially for the viewer or the reader, when they don't know how the other person is feeling about it. You're in the shoes of the nervous, and
Yeah.
it kind of raises the stakes for you personally when you get invested in that development. So when you are looking at writing your romance stories, and here's all these different relationship dynamics, how do they impact the overall story structure, the plot devices, all of that?
In relation to this specific,
Yeah. So
plot device,
so if let's say we take pull, if your characters, they're going to be a pull, then does that kind of to inform you how the plot's going to go for the rest of the book, as opposed to a push pull or a push?
I think it should because a meet cute is like supposed to inform us of the plot or how it's going to end up, and it should foreshadow when you can. It should foreshadow how things are going to wrap up by the end. And I personally think without a meet cute, there wouldn't be a romance story, at least one that does not involve childhood friends.
Mm-hmm. That's
Mm,
true, because you've already met each other, so it's not like
exactly.
strangers coming to. That's an interesting thing. Okay, let's say that you do have a story where they're friends. Can a meet cute be kind of put in there under certain circumstances between old friends?
I think so. Maybe an example could be they haven't met in over like 5 years or 10 years, and they virtually know nothing about them in the present. They only know their past lives and how they used to react and how they used to interact with each other. So I definitely do think a meet cute could be applied under those circumstances where they meet again and they start, to rekindle their friendship as well as, start to develop a relationship.
Mm, then that got me thinking of Anakin and Padme Amidala, the second
Uh-huh.
of the prequels, when they haven't seen each other for a while and he's grown up. And that's a good example of initially a push-pull, because he's nervous, he wants to see her, he's clearly attracted to her, but she kind of belittles him at first, like
Yeah.
referring to him as a little boy, kind of insulting him a little bit and asserting herself. And then
Mhm.
that eventually changes throughout the movie.
Yeah, it does. I did not think of that example.
Yeah. Because at first I was like, is that neutral nervous? I'm like, because no, I don't feel like Padme's very neutral in his advances. I think at first, like, he gets really frustrated about how she kind of belittles him at first, because he's like, I'm a man, you know. I want her to think of me as a man.
Uh-huh.
um, do you meet cutes happen in real life, and have you experienced one?
They do. They happen in real life, but not the way that a romance novel would want it to go. Like, it doesn't really happen the way you want it to go.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I remember this is for my ex-boyfriend. I remember I followed him on social media
Mm.
and he followed me back and he immediately jumped into my DMs and we
Uh-huh.
started talking. Um, we did have chemistry online, but then how it happened in real life, I was nervous. He was nervous. It kind of, it's like expectations versus reality. And I feel like to a certain extent, romance novels and romance movies kind of, um, give you high expectations of what a meet cute should look like. But
Mm.
when it really happens, it's awkward. It's
Yes.
usually awkward.
That's
Or you can't even call it a meet cute at the time. You only figure it out later.
that's a really good way of putting it. Yes. So well said. Because it, like, I feel like if, okay, let's say it's a club or an environment where you're kind of like, the expectations are, okay, if he's talking to you, he's probably interested, vice versa, right?
Yeah.
But then there's
Yeah.
like all the pressure. That's where the cheesy one-liners come out, you know. But there is that pressure that's kind of sitting on it, which makes it, which isn't the same feeling as a meet cute in a movie, where I always feel like meet cutes hinge on something else. Like, it's not always the expectation of romance, but it's the circumstance of something broader. I'm trying to think of, like, for example, if you're rounding the corner and you bump into somebody and you both fall and you touch hands picking up the books, right? You didn't bump into him with the expectation that this is how I this is how I'm going to trap him, right? You know, like, it's an accident. That's the charm of a meet cute. And through that circumstance that is unromantic, there's physical proximity, the accidental touching, there's an action as you're scrambling to pick up your books, and then you see
Yeah.
that person in a specific light, in a specific, I yeah, okay. I think I've seen I think
Yeah.
point.
It's okay.
But yeah, I love how you said that. So then okay, let's get kind of have fun here, workshop this a little bit. When I
Mhm.
think of meet cutes, I tend to think of period dramas, or, things that are reflective of the movies that I used to grow up and watch during college, so early 2000s. Um, but let's look at the modern digital age, where romance seems so structured now. If you're not meeting people like in class, or in your work area, or on the street, you're using dating apps, and you
Yeah,
have like this coordinated date where that's like the expectation, right? So all that pressure is sitting there.
exactly.
How in the world does a meet cute look? What does it look like in a modern digital age?
It could go both ways. It could go two ways actually. For example, let's say Tinder, you set up a date with someone on Tinder and you're about to meet them for the first time. Uh, I'm just gonna double back to what I said before about expectations like versus reality. That person may not be your type when you're with them versus your type when you're like online. For
Ooh.
example, I feel like people tend to create or at least heighten their personality online when they're when there's no one who's there to watch them, or when there's no one who's there to say, hey, this is not how you act in real life. But
Mhm.
then when it comes to meeting someone in person, you can instantly feel, sometimes you can feel that this is not the person that I'm going to continue going out with. It could be a one-time thing. I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but you can just tell that someone's identity online, like how they present themselves, is different from how they are in person.
I would think an interesting meet cute in that circumstance, because that feels like a meet disappointment. So like a meet cute,
Yeah.
it would be if you're waiting for your Tinder date and they don't show up, but you mistake someone else coming in the door for your Tinder date, and maybe it's
Oh.
you for his date, but maybe they didn't show, or maybe there's somewhere else, I don't know. And so, you wave him over, and in this circumstance, maybe you never saw pictures, or maybe he's the twin. I don't know. But
Oh.
the complete accident. But then you have like, if it's discovered at that time, then you bond over it, or like
Yeah,
you trip over these fun things outside of just like,
exactly. Oh, it definitely could go two ways. I just feel like if someone's going to meet someone online, like if you made a Tinder date, just expect it to go anyway. Cause
Yeah. Because it could be a really good outcome, right? Like you meet and
exactly.
yeah, yeah. I've never dated in the modern age. My now husband and I dated years ago, and we figured it out
Mhm.
without the use of apps. So I hear stories now, and it's such a different world to me. How familiar are you with that part of the dating world?
I've never jumped on any dating sites, and I don't think I ever will. But I will say that I've had cases where it's like the wrong number that just
Mm,
comes
yep.
to my inbox, and it's awkward because they usually send a picture and
Yeah.
have no context, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is the wrong person they're sending it to.
That's
And I
true.
can't explain how it works. I have to tell them it's the wrong number, and they're like, oh, I am so sorry.
Yeah. The wrong number thing is awkward. I've gotten that a handful of times too. I had one where
Yeah.
the guy was he was a fitness trainer at like the LA Fitness, and he's like, "Hey, so are we getting to get together before our session?" And I
Mm.
didn't at first I was like, "Well, I go to the gym too. I work out. Who's this guy?" Right? So I didn't go to I didn't go to LA Fitness at the time though. I went somewhere else. And so I text back, I'm like, "What?" And he just kind of kept going, and I was like, and it turns out like he didn't want to believe me when I said that it wasn't
Oh.
me. Like he would thought I was the girl joking. And so finally I had to pretend to be a guy, and that got him to leave me alone. The, the things that you had, I don't know. Anyway.
That was creative. That was actually creative. I'm gonna give it to you.
Yeah, and I've got my fair share of unsolicited pics, and I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm like,
that's a topic for another day.
it really, yes, and like, does that qualify as a meet cute? Probably not. All right, let's see. What other notes do you have on what does a meet cute look like in the modern digital age?
I had this one note, but it's kind of dark. It's
Oh,
really dark.
ooh, okay.
I'm still gonna say it. Um, so when again, let's use Tinder.
Okay.
You swipe right and plan your date and everything. You got catfished and
Oh.
and you figured out that, oh my goodness, have you ever watched MTV, like the Catfish show?
No, I haven't, but that sounds like it sucks.
There's a show where people were catfished into like sending um money online, sending their money, trying to talk to someone to see if they're gonna fly them out to meet them. Then they meet the person, and it's very different. They usually steal pictures online and impersonate someone.
Ooh.
And then there's another point that I made. This one is actually dark. This one, the one that I just did was not dark. It was just something that I thought of when
Uh-huh.
I was looking back in my childhood watching
Oh.
Catfish. and telling myself I will never, never do this. So it could be like someone who's trying to um you know abuse you
Yes.
online, or like when they meet you in person, they could be a human trafficker sometimes. It happens. I haven't heard it happen personally for people in my area, but it happens in my country,
Oh my goodness. What country?
Zimbabwe.
Oh wow. Okay. So now we're talking about meet cutes going dark. Like
Oh,
the
okay.
dark side of
Oh
of the
no.
modern meet cutes. That's terrifying. But yeah, like what happens if the meet cute is manufactured? The setup, it's a setup. That's terrifying.
That is absolutely terrifying. And it's the opposite of how a meet cute should be, you know. A meet cute should be romantic, awkward, and you're terrified for your life meeting
Yeah.
someone that you don't know, and they could, they could end up murdering you if they really thought about it.
Yes.
For example, I remember it's a book that I read a long time ago. It's called The Cellar. I don't remember how they met, but then she ended up getting kidnapped and kept in a cellar
Oh my God.
with other girls, with like three
Terrifying.
other girls that were named after flowers. He gave them a name. And
Ugh.
every time they would try to say, no, don't do this or disobey, he'd like physically harm them.
Oh gosh.
So that's like a dark side to meet cute, because they actually did meet. I think it was on a dating app, and she was expecting. So he was actually really handsome, according to her.
Hmm.
But then you never know what someone's thinking of.
Yeah.
And I'm really gonna try and look back to when I read that book because I don't remember the author.
That does seem to be I've talked about a book called Perfect Days that I don't know if it was very it kind of I guess it was manufactured from the beginning, and then he kind of shows his true side. It's a
Uh-huh.
terrifying twisted. His mom basically said, "Why don't you write romance books?" So he's like, "Okay." And he wrote this really messed up book. Um Another example, I guess, is You on Netflix. I haven't,
Oh
but people
my
keep
god.
telling me about it.
I absolutely don't understand why people love you. Like,
It's
I
terrifying.
love the acting and everything, but Joe just gets worse. He gets worse. Gets worse each season. And when he has somebody who's like him, he can't handle it. It's just
Mm,
so sad.
yeah. Okay, well, let's think of a less terrifying okay, there was a comedy that came out, and I'm forgetting it was with a female comedian who I think produced it and directed it. I'm not quite sure all the details, but it's about a woman who has a hard time finding a guy or whatnot. She meets a guy on the plane, and he
Mhm.
seems charming and cute. But it's also it's almost like when you look at the Uncanny Valley, where it kind of resembles
Yeah.
what you want, but there's something wrong. I was picking it like I felt that there was like this immense feeling of discomfort that I kept having from it, where it didn't like there are little clues, and I think they did that very deliberately, where what he was saying didn't quite it's when the smile doesn't quite meet the eyes. What he was saying wasn't quite fitting other, aspects about him. And it turns
Oh,
out
okay.
that he had manufactured everything. And
Oh
he was
my
trying to
goodness.
I think his goal ultimately was to leech off of her, but it ended up being like a revenge story where she, gets her revenge on him about that and confronts him with that. But it was weird because my husband and I were watching it and we're like, what's going on? Something's different, something's weird. And my poor husband, who's just so optimistic and he's got a beautiful heart, he's like, but he's just a nerd. He's just, and then and I'm like, no, there's something going on. You always have to listen to your gut, right? And I think the
Yeah.
movie that's what the point of the movie was. But luckily, no one, I don't think no one died. I
What's the
didn't
name
finish.
of the movie? I want to watch
Okay, I'll have to look
it.
it up. I think we saw it on Netflix. I'm pretty sure. It's one of their, you know how Netflix has like their line of comedians and they all end up getting like contracts to have movies and specials and stuff like that with Netflix. I think it
Yeah.
was one of those situations. So
Oh,
anyway, any other examples of meet cutes going dark?
I think that's it. That's all I could think of. You have
So
yeah.
now we've gone from like, oh, meet cutes are so fun to like, oh my God, lock your doors and never go have one. Like, okay, so for this last portion, I came up with like just weird speculative scenarios since this is a speculative sandbox. And I
Mhm.
wanted to workshop what would a meet cute look like for the following scenarios. So are you ready?
Okay,
Okay.
I am.
Last two people on Earth.
That sounds like the start to the best post-apocalyptic story that will ever be written. I think a meet cute like that would look like um maybe okay, this is an example I came up with from the top of my head. I know it's been used before, but for example, one character basically saves the other character's life,
Oh.
and he doesn't realize, he or she or they don't realize that hey, they're the second last person on earth with them. So
Oh,
they try to
interesting.
like navigate, their new world. Like that's something that I came up with. I really thought it would be so interesting to write.
Yeah. Because in that scenario, what I picture when you say that, it's like maybe some guy was living like Fraser did a movie a long time ago where I think he came out of like a time capsule or whatever and the world had changed. And I can almost picture that, like someone who came out, ventured out, found someone else, and he
Yeah.
doesn't realize he's the last person on Earth or that the other person is the other last person on Earth. Um,
Oh, wow.
so it's like kind of a happy circumstance.
That
Um,
is so good. Or another example where they think that they're the last person on earth, and then they see another human, the amount of joy
uh-huh.
you would
Yes.
feel, the amount of joy and relief.
Yes. Or what if the circumstance of them being the only one left on Earth is like pretty sad and terrifying, so that when they do see another person, they're like, are you actually real? You
Oh
know?
my goodness, that would be so terrifying, especially if it's like a story where AI has taken over.
Oh, yeah.
I remember there's this game. I don't remember the name of the game, but AI has taken over,
Mm.
and the police officer or like the soldier's partner um is now AI. So he gets to a point where this was so hard to make. That decision was so hard to make. Where he meets someone that looks exactly like his partner, and there are two versions of them, and he's trying to figure out which one is the good guy and which one is the bad guy out of the two, because they're trying to um you know rule the world and rid them of every human. They thought there was only one human left. They thought
Oh,
there were more humans left after they saw the cop alive. So it was so terrifying.
that is terrifying. Well, okay. The scenarios get even more ridiculous. Okay. Now,
Okay.
what would a meet cute look like between a living human and a ghost?
Oh my goodness. This would be comedy. It would be so terrifying at first. It would be so terrifying at first. Like, I think they're trying to produce a movie about this year. I don't remember the name of the movie, but someone dies and they don't know the next person, and that person is the only one that can see them. So it's terrifying because they're like, hey, let's solve my murder
Ooh,
together.
ooh. So initially it's like a push-pull because the
Exactly.
ghost's like, hey, I need your help. And you're like, no,
And
I
they're like,
guess.
what? No. I feel
Interesting.
like that would be so terrifying to imagine you're waking up and then there's like someone beside you and you're like, what? And you try to hit them, but you can't because they're a
Yeah.
ghost.
Yes. And when you think about romance too, okay, the easy button is that ghost better be really good looking and fitting of my personal taste. But
Yeah.
what if it's not? I've seen versions of ghosts like in different stories. Like for example, V.E. Schwab has, I forgot what the book is called, but it's like a dark gothic horror, and her ghosts in that one are just remnants of body parts depending on like how strong the spirit is, how old the spirit is. So let's say that you aren't even woken up by like a ghost that looks like a person. It's a ghost that looks like a disembodied head with like a lung and,
Oh.
like femurs, and that's what's talking to you. And then imagine then throughout the story, if this is a romance,
Yeah.
so the meet cute, I guess what makes it cute is that for us, we think it's a funny encounter, but it's terrifying, right? Like you said, for the human. But then to go through a story where they're helping each other out for whatever reason, solving a murder, maybe the ghost saves the person at one time.
Yeah.
Then it takes it to a whole nother level if someone starts to fall in love with like floating sacks of meat and flesh. Like
Oh my
it's kind of like how Joaquin Phoenix falls in love with artificial intelligence, it's because it's not
God.
about like how the person looks, it's about how you connect, the bond.
Yeah, I understand. Oh my goodness.
Okay.
Can you just imagine how the ghost would feel though?
Yeah.
Like, let's think about the ghost's feelings as well. We're only
Yeah.
thinking about the human.
That's true. Poor ghost. So what if the ghost actually isn't interested? What if the ghost like, look, I just need you for help here. I have a
Oh,
wife. She's somewhere else.
what if the human falls in love with the ghost? If the ghost just doesn't love the human back?
Oh, that's so sad. Then it's a tragedy, right? Because
Yeah.
doesn't for it to count as like a romance genre, does there have to be a happy ending? Happily ever after?
No,
No? Okay. So it can
it
be
doesn't
sad?
have to be.
Right. Who cares about these rules? No rules. Throw them out. Break them all.
Absolutely.
Okay. My last scenario is very absurd because we've now removed the human. But I was like, let's get creative here. This
Okay.
is artificial intelligence versus a robo-caller. Now, before you're like, what? Let me explain.
Okay.
I know for a fact on TikTok, at least, that people have received, like, they get so many robocalls, right? That they end up like receiving them on multiple phones. And then you have, like, you turn them on at the same, you answer them at the same time, and they end up talking to each other on speaker to various degrees. And maybe it's fake and maybe it's authentic. I don't know. That a
Uh-huh.
standard robocaller is very obvious. Artificial intelligence calls, I don't know if people have received these yet. But what they do is it's a computer program that responds to what you say, and it's very convincing. I had one call me about 5 years ago that made me think they were part of like a police families of fallen police officers foundation, and they were raising money.
Oh.
And as I was and the thing is I work with police officers all the time. So I started asking follow-up questions, and it
Uh-huh.
was very convincingly answering my questions until it started to kind of expose itself as it's not a human, especially when I said, well, hold on, let me see. I don't know just yet. And then it defaulted to the no answer and gave me something that was so bizarrely not in tune with the conversation. I'm like, this isn't a real person. So
Okay.
that's the circumstance. You have a very advanced spam caller versus like your standard robo-caller, and now they're talking to each other. What
Oh no.
can
Oh
a meet
wow.
cute happen from that?
That
Sorry. This is what happens when you let me have free reign.
oh
Like,
my goodness. That is creative. That's very creative. I have never thought about that. Maybe that sounds like a good, subplot. Good
I guess
stuff.
the meet cute would be in the actual act of answering the phones and then like hearing it go back and forth, and then they realize something is up. Like they start tripping over each
Yeah.
other. Not cute for them. Maybe it's cute for us that's listening.
Because like I'm trying to see how that would happen in real life. And I
Definitely
just can
fabricated.
imagine like one caller has a delay in responding.
Yeah.
And it's so awkward. There's some awkward.
Yeah, it would be really awkward. I would have secondhand awkwardness. What's the word when you have like secondhand shame or whatever when you're not even in the situation?
Second-hand embarrassment.
Yes. All right. Any other funky, funny meet cutes you could think of just in general? It doesn't have to be those scenarios.
This is absurd. I'm so sorry
Bring it.
that
It's
I am
fun.
subjecting you to this because I was subjected to it a few days ago when I asked my boyfriend, because he's really funny too. And he's actually quite insane sometimes.
Okay.
So he said, take Beauty and the Beast, but the beast stays the beast.
Oh, like never turns.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Like they just stayed, in their beast form. They never change. Take that and make it a romance
Oh,
where they
interesting.
get married and stuff. And how would they handle things?
Yeah. Well, I guess I don't know. Was Belle, and going off of the Disney animated, was Belle ever like promised that he would turn back at any point? Or was that just like a happy,
That was
cool?
a happy ending. I don't think she was ever promised that, which is why I feel like when he brought this up, he actually had this question. He was like, "Huh, what if he never turned?
What if he never turned?
Would she
Well,
stay with him?"
I think she would simply because I
It's a
don't think she had the
Disney.
expectation in the first place. I guess maybe she could have had a hint when she was going through his things and saw the ripped portrait of his former self.
Uh-huh.
But
But
I think, well, because she was startled when he first became a human, right? And he had to kind of assure her that it's me. Always Belle, it's me. Like, when you watch things as a kid and you have that, intonations, everything burned into the back of your brain.
yeah, I get it. But then,
I think
how
she,
would that look in like a different type of movie?
oh yeah, that almost feels like that could be oh shoot, who's the guy that does all the Tim Burton? I feel like that would be a very Tim
Absolutely.
Burton.
Yes, I remember now. I remember. He did this movie. What is it called? Is it Sweeney Todd?
Yeah, he did Sweeney Todd.
Exactly.
Yes, uh where that Corpse Bride, there's some other examples where you see people that aren't exactly like I like, beautiful, healthy people, but they still have their love stories. So if Beast were to stay the way that he is, now you're talking about a very unconventional uh couple. And I can see
Mhm.
that working for Tim Burton. And
Yeah, I see that working. Or maybe one of like the director of Malignant, because
oh,
that movie was crazy.
Malignant. I have not seen that yet. That looks scary now that I'm looking at it. James Wan.
Absolutely. And I'm
Okay.
gonna go see Megan.
Oh, I heard
Like
it's really good. Like-
it is. It is. But I want to see how Megan is. I feel like Malignant is only if you get what he's trying to do, he's just having fun with the
Mm,
concept.
yeah.
If you don't take it too seriously, then yeah,
Mm.
it's amazing. But if you take it too seriously, it's all over the place.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. Well, Salem, I've really enjoyed this time chatting with you. Do you have any final thoughts, notes, or promos that you'd like to leave us with?
I would like to say to everybody listening to this that if they're interested in checking out my upcoming releases or checking out my debut series, the Devington series, they can follow me at Written by Salem on Instagram. I am currently making a Facebook page as well, but they can follow me to check for, any updates. And as well, if they're into, young adult sapphic fiction, I love writing sapphic fiction. they should definitely give my work a try.
Speculative Sandbox is a volunteer-run podcast that relies on the collaboration of fellow creators like you. Join the conversation and participate in fun polls and questionnaires on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Interested in being in a future episode? Our DMs are open, or you can email speculativesandbox@gmail.com.